So we start with the very beginning, and this very beginning starts in Genesis in the Bible. And what we learn there is that God is the one who created everything from the very beginning. And he created us, he created the animals, he created the planets, the universe, and so on. And when he created us, obviously there was no questions about does God exist, does God not exist, because we were together. And that's the most important thing to remember. And this is what the gospel is all about, is that it's about having this relationship with Jesus. It's about having this relationship with God. It's a relationship that we had when he created us, when we were together. It's a relationship that we lost, and we'll see how we lost it. And it's a relationship that was brought back to us thanks to Jesus' sacrifice on the cross. So this is what the gospel is all about. But we'll explain the details about how everything happened. And so we start with, like we said, that in the beginning we were together, we had a relationship with God. And those first human beings that God created, the Bible calls them Adam and Eve. This is how they were called. And basically what happened is that they were in this place that the Bible calls the Garden of Eden. And they were together with God. They had a relationship with God in that place. And in that place where they were, that God created, he gave them freedom to do, to enjoy this place. But he gave them, some rules to follow, some things that they would have to follow. He gave them, one instruction of something that they will need to not do. And that one thing is that in this beautiful place, the Garden of Eden where they were, God had made two trees that were sort of special. One of them was called the tree of life, and you can guess from the name what this tree is all about. It's basically a tree. If you eat of it, you will live forever, which is quite nice. And there was a second tree that was called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, what God told those first human beings, he told them, okay, you can eat of all the trees that are there except from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And what was in this situation is that those human beings, they only knew good at that time, but now was this tree that could teach them, not only good, but evil as well. And he told them, you can eat of every tree here except of that tree of knowledge of good and evil. And he gave them a warning. He told them, the day you eat of that tree, you're going to die. And so that's one thing to remember. And so that was the warning that he gave them. The day you eat of that tree, you're going to die. Now, unfortunately, in that place where they were, we could say that they were not alone. And there was one guy that was there also that we call the devil, that was there and that came and tempted them. He tempted them so that they would go and eat of that tree, because he knew what was going to happen. He knew that they were going to disobey, that something was going to happen. And so unfortunately, instead of keeping to what God had said, they sort of gave in to the temptation that the devil brought to them. And so they went and ate of that tree of the knowledge of good and evil that God had told them, do not eat of it. And what happened when they did that is that they became what the Bible calls sinners. And I'll represent it like this by turning the cups over, that they were righteous before, they were clean and so on, but now they had become sinners. What that means, in a very simple way, is that they now had a new nature in them. And that new nature is the reason for, the wrong things that we see in the world today, the killings, the hatred, and so on. It comes from that sinful nature, which is that nature that causes people to do wrong things. And so God saw what happened, and he had to make a tough decision. He saw that now, okay, they have become like this, okay. So he told them, okay, now I cannot let them come and eat of the other tree, the tree of life, which was, a good tree where they could have taken it and lived forever. But now he told them, okay, now you cannot eat of that tree anymore, okay, or not yet, okay. And we could ask the question, why would God say, okay, now I don't want you to eat of that tree now, not anymore, okay, not at this moment, okay? A very simple answer, or one of the main reasons, okay, is that if they eat of that tree now, that tree of life, okay, they will eat forever. If we say, okay, this is super great, this is basically what, some movies are all about. We want to live forever and so on. And what you see, like sometimes it's shown in some of these movies, is that the guy at the end manages to live forever, but he realizes that actually this is not so much of a blessing, but it's a curse, because now, he's going to be like this forever. And this was something like this with those human beings, is that now, okay, they could eat of that tree of life and live forever, but the issue is that they will live forever in that sinful nature. So the way you could compare to some of these movies where you have this issue happening, or you could compare it would just be like living forever, but in a prison cell. It's like someone is telling you, we'll live forever, but we'll put you in a prison cell, basically. And so in order to, avoid those human beings, coming and eating of that tree of life, what God had to do is had to create a separation between himself and those human beings, so that they wouldn't touch of that tree of life yet. Okay, so he had a plan, to rescue them out of this sinful nature, out of this sin that had entered them. Okay, but first he had to make that plan happen. He had to set them free from this sin before they can come back and eat of that tree of life. Okay, so this is how the separation happened between God and the human beings, and this is how we ended up, in this situation where those human beings were left alone, or sort of left alone, we could say. And this is where, all those questions start to arise. Does God exist? Does God not exist? And all these wrong things that we hear about today, this is where they started.